So there's a new app on the border called the CBP One, and apparently, and it could anyway. Apparently, it's had like a major effect in terms of the drop in the number of border crossings because people are told to download this app and wait their turn via the app to get the appointment to be able to then cross, right? And so you can't get let in unless you have like that appointment. You can show it on the app, blah, blah. It's creating havoc on the Mexico side of the border still. But on the U.S. side, it's like, things are, sort of the veneer that things are okay because there aren't as many people crossing. What have you heard about the app? And it is also, politically, it might look actually kind of good. Not that any Republican is giving Biden credit for it, but what are your thoughts on that, this app situation?
Yeah, I have this comparison. Might be silly, but like imagine somebody trying to get a ticket on Ticketmaster for like Taylor Swift concert.
Mm-hmm.
We've heard stories; they're crazy. Like people are trying to get these tickets. Now imagine that for people who are trying to save their lives, right? Where literally they are having to look every single day in this app to see if there are slots for them, and most of the time there's not, because there are very limited slots and there's tons and tons of people who are seeking protection. And not only that, it's been glitchy. At the beginning, when they rolled this out, we literally were hearing stories from some of our partners who work with Black migrants, which basically the app wouldn't recognize darker skin tones. So a lot of our Haitian migrants or brothers, sisters, and siblings, like they couldn't like they have to like take a picture and they couldn't recognize their face. So we had to like protest about that. Hey, what's going on? This thing is discriminating against people who have darker skin colors. Most people, I would say, and most of the kids we work with are indigenous, and so a lot of them speak indigenous languages. They also perhaps can't even read or speak Spanish. Other folks, again, a lot of Haitians, and now there's a few other people who are migrating from more countries than just Latin America. And so the app doesn't have those languages. So you have basically people who are trying to figure out how to every single day log into this thing. And then when they have a chance to apply or to use the app, they don't understand the language, or they can't figure out how to do it. And so and I can go on, there's been a lot of challenges with this app, and obviously people who don't have access to a phone are pretty much.
Of course, that was my first thought, was like yeah, people carrying like limited amounts of things. I mean, obviously, like, I don't know, it seems ubiquitous, but yeah, the first thought was, who has a smartphone? That is few in and of itself, especially if you are seeking asylum. I mean, yeah, I think it's really interesting to like rely. Yeah, I don't know. I guess I thought it was curious that it cut the border crossings, and part of me was like, this is good, but then yeah, it's just kicking the can down the road even farther. Like, what is wrong with allowing people to safely cross and making sure they do so, and can be kept from harm, because that's really the thing, right? It's just passing a hot, like, for lack of this is a horrible, but it's a hot potato situation of like, well, at least it's not on this side of the border kind of thing, and we can kind of keep, folks in the Mexico side of the border, which has its own, I mean, talk about precarity and subject to violence. This is all, by the way, from a lot of Republicans who are mad at Biden, people who pretend to care about children, as you were saying, people who pretend that pedophiles exist, and they're like, yeah, they are preyed upon. If you help them into the United States, their chances of being preyed upon go down greatly. What about
to stay with their families, basically?
Or exactly. Sorry, but I'm so like, what about DACA? You have been obviously as a recipient, and oh, this is what I was going to say, because having scans of your face, having these databases, they are fine maybe in the hands of a Democratic administration, but not even. But how scary is that to kind of open up all of this data on undocumented folks to these, not just the DOJ or, DOJ and Department of Homeland Security, but like, I don't know, all kinds of tech companies and whatnot.
Yeah, I mean, that's the idea for them, right? They want to have as much data as possible. They want to have as much information as possible so they can continue to follow individuals and families if they make it to the US, right? If they're able to get an appointment and come in and they keep track of people, right? People have to go back and have appointments with ICE. They have to, some people, there's a new program that was also rolled out with asylum ban where families have one person in the family has to wear an ankle monitor at all times. And so they have to, I'm not exactly sure how they choose, but there's definitely one person who has to make sure that they have a monitor on them. So it's a lot of sort of using this type of technology now to be able to keep track of people,
right?
Because they don't trust that people will show up to court. People don't trust that people will follow through in their process, which is actually not the truth. We know that when people have access to a lawyer, when people have the understanding of how to follow the process, they want to do it. They'll show up to court. They'll go and they'll talk to a judge, but they want to be able to understand what's going on. And sometimes they just don't. And so, all in all, these are all what they call deterrence policies. It's basically, they will say it. If you can Google deterrence, and it's literally the plan for most of the presidencies we've seen in the past, Obama, Trump, and now Biden. They use deterrence to make sure that people, basically like telling people, we're going to make your life impossible, so you shouldn't come, instead of figuring out ways in which we can welcome folks in a humane way.
Well, you started by saying maybe there are a couple good leaders. Like, who do you feel like is, I mean, are they just sort of nameless behind the scenes? I think it was the New York Times or New Yorker did this incredible expose on a young woman in the Biden administration who quit, basically. She was, you can speak to it better maybe, but specifically working on immigration, and quit because it was like clear that she was hitting her head against a wall and there was no real appetite for pivoting and having a policy that truly does put human lives first. But who are the folks that are sort of like blazing the trail?
Yeah, unfortunately, so when the Biden administration took power, one of the things I kept saying was like, I really, really hope that there's like the opposite of Steve Miller. Like, imagine like there was the sort of like the flip, they flip a coin. There's like that person. And I'll tell you that we didn't get that, unfortunately, but we did have a lot of administration officials who cared about the issue. People who used to be advocates, right? Who many of us used to work with as advocates. I will say that most of them are gone. Most of them, for one reason or the other, where not really pushed out, they just left because they just didn't think that they were being heard. And Andrea Flores, who you're talking about, is one of those folks who left, and she wrote this great piece. I think it might have been in the New Yorker. I don't remember exactly, but she specifically also talked about the treatment she saw between Ukrainians when everything happened, when we started seeing a lot more Ukrainians at the border versus other communities, which was like brown and Black communities, indigenous communities, and just the contrast of how we were able to get this process in place for Ukrainians that was fast, it was orderly, it was humane, etc. And you saw what they were doing on the other hand, and it was a huge contrast, right? And so people like her speaking out about that, I think it's definitely important. And on in the congressional side, we have people like Alex Padilla and Chuy Garcia in the House, and there's a few other folks who have been pushing really hard, but again, they just don't really have the power right now. Or I don't know if they're being really taken as seriously as they should. But Joaquin Castro just went to the border to expose what's going on with Abbott. which is great. I think we, even though there isn't like the ability to pass legislation right now, or they don't think they do, or they just are not trying hard enough. At least some of these folks are exposing what's going on with people like Abbott.
Totally.
But we need more, and we need
Yeah.
this issue to stop being played as a political football.
Oh.
That's the only way it's gonna.
I mean, and it's gotten so ridiculous. Like just in the past year, past few months, they're like literally playing with people's lives by sending them on buses, without I mean, who cares, like adequate stops or food or shelter or anything like that, just sending folks on buses to blue states. I mean, that's how cartoonish. I mean, the buoys. We are in a cartoonish moment when it comes to immigration in this country. And we've always talked about it as like, well, it's a cartoonish system, but now we've got like literal cartoon villains doing cartoon villain. I mean, what are they gonna do? Like tie them to railroad tracks? I feel like that's fucking next. Like no one would be surprised. Oh no, there's an anvil that just got dropped. Like that's really where we're at. I guess Ida, you please jump in. Any final thoughts?
I as a Puerto Rican Dominican child growing up, where I was told that I had privilege because I had citizenship. One of the things that as I've evolved as an adult, understanding that they don't treat us any better, even though we all saw during Maria. I would like to always take an opportunity to encourage all of us to, be mindful of the other people in the room. I participated in Chitla marches, and I would go out and speak out, and people would say, "You American, why do you care?" And I'm like, because those are my brothers and sisters. Um, before being this Latina title, I'm an indigenous child, of African descendants of Africans, and the Puerto Rico, the Dominican Republic, Cuba, Haiti, Jamaica, all of us that belong to Taino land are have a lot more in common. I just think that we have to think collectively. I read a story recently about, and I think people don't really need to understand the whitewashing of America. This fear that it's going to be overrun by people of color, and that white people are going to disappear when they outnumber us greatly, is deep. A lot of these issues are deeply rooted in that. The abortion issue is trying to put white women's bodies because they want to make sure that more white people are born, keeping the immigrants out. And the psychological trauma that people have to endure as a result of this. I was taken away from my father. I didn't grow up with him because my father was deported, and I never got to see my father again until I was an adult and able to fly myself to the Dominican Republic to see him. I read a story about a young girl that was taken from her mother and given to another family. She had to go live there when her mother was finally able to find her. Now this girl has a psychological trauma because she has been with this family for years, and her own mother is a stranger. And we have to employ empathy when it comes to immigrant stories. These are human beings. And I have a lot of white friends who always tell me about their immigrant stories. My grandfather came here from Ireland, and it's always this story with that is always very regal and powerful in this history. Well, you know what? Those people that walk from Guatemala to America are also heroes. You know what I mean? And we need to be responsible for reframing our stories and pushing back when other people. That's one thing that even with Puerto Ricans, myself, I'm always like, fuera de aquí con eso. We're not going to do that to one another, because those of us who know better, we got to do better, because the people who don't know better are not.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's really real. And I think, this is also an area where I'll say that I think the left generally has been a little absent, because it's not like a,
wait a minute. Sorry. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off. That's what I wanted to say that Erica said. I'm so sorry.
Yeah. No, please.
That there's the cowardice. They're just cowards. And the thing about not having an allegiance to a political party because we actually care about the people is that the Republican Party, they band together for their evil, regardless of whatever. They fight, and they will fight till the end. They will support the people they don't even believe in just because of party affiliation. Look at all the people who ride for Trump, knowing good and well that Trump is wrong. But when it comes to the Democrats and this liberal policy of trying to be taking the higher road and being, we're being so, sometimes that is just as toxic as those other people, because sometimes you have to roll up your sleeves and fight. And I'm not an advocate of violence, but I am not mad about what happened in Montgomery. And I wish that people would show up on behalf of these immigrants who are being mistreated and did the same thing, because we have to fight, because they don't have any shame. They have no shame. Sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I love that. I think that's great. I mean,
Preach.
Yeah, exactly. So you're saying we should all stick together and stick with Biden? Is that what you're saying, Ida? You're saying we back our boy? No. I mean, look, I was just gonna say I think that the left is kind of like doesn't really have a good strategy in line when it comes to this, especially because it is such an issue that is so skewed to the right, and so it doesn't feel like and it's also not that's like, I don't know, maybe it's not as like exciting as like Medicare for all or like housing rights and whatnot. But it is so crucial that we have immigrant rights and human rights as part of our understanding of, like, I mean, and I'm curious, our like political understanding, because I do think we're in a moment, just like the private healthcare industry, completely gutless, irreconcilable, beyond repair. The same with this border, man. The same with DHS. The same with ICE. Abolish ICE is the floor for me. Like let's go for more. Like, yeah, man, open borders. I don't give a shit. Like, nobody actually says open borders, but I believe it, because guess what? It's going to lead to the fewest amount of people dying. What's going on, Frantifa? If you haven't already, subscribe to this channel right now. Hit that button. And also, you can become a patron and support the show every single week. Get access to bonus episodes and exclusive merchandise. Patreon.com/Bitchuation Room. Do it.